Welcome back to the Practical Woodsman podcast. I'm Rut, the creator and host of the Practical Woodsman. That's right. It's my immeasurable, incomprehensible genius which has brought this all into existence. In this episode, how's about you and I talk about how to make a camp? How to make a camp. Does that sound too elementary? Well, I happen to know that most of yous are by far more accustomed to staying at camps that have already been made for you. Somebody else has already gone out and done all the work in selecting the location, in creating a fire ring, picking out level ground, and all these things. So instead of all that stuff, let's talk about making your own camp. Also, I want to share with you folks some of my thinking on the current updated titles and thumbnails that I've been using for episodes of this show. Some people might think that I'm resorting to clickbait methods. Is that really what I'm up to? Well, we'll talk about it, and maybe I can soften some of your black as coal hearts out there. But first, to get us all in the mood, winkety winkety, we have to do the musical introduction. So let's get that out of the way. Don't go nowhere. Stick around. I'll be right here when it ends. You're still here? Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Think about joining our online community over at thepracticalwoodsman.locals.com. Another way you can join us is by downloading the really spiffy locals.com app from the App Store and then just searching for The Practical Woodsman within. I try to participate on a regular basis over there with various types of posts, including live streams on Saturdays, but only there. Myself and our other members would love to welcome you into the fold. Before we get into the main topic, which is making your own camps instead of relying on others to do it for you, let's talk about the recent changes that you may have noticed that I've made to the titles and thumbnails for the Practical Woodsman content. Until now, maybe you've been used to all of my titles for these shows being pretty straightforward. For example, if the main title of the episode, or if the main topic of the episode was water filters, just as an example, then my titles were usually something straightforward like the best backpacking water filters, or something along those lines, something really unembellished. My experience producing content on a regular basis and the various components that go into all of this is a work in progress, I'll admit. To be honest, I know a lot more now than I knew a year ago. And in another year, I'll know a whole lot more then than I do now. In fact, in another year, if the good Lord sees fit to still have me around breathing and enjoying his good green earth, it's entirely possible that my current approach to titles and thumbnails will evolve, and I'll be trying something different. So we'll just have to wait and see. I don't know yet what I don't know. I'll tell you this about me. I love movies. And in particular, I love older movies. A lot of movies from like the 30s, 40s, 50s. I really love that era for movies. And I especially have a special affinity for cheesy science fiction B movies. Man, when I was a kid, I used to love pulp magazines, old science fiction movies and serials. I love watching the trailers, like the movie trailers, the previews from those old movies. And one thing that defines these old movie trailers are these really over-the-top declarations of just how spectacular or awesome or horrific and terrifying the movie is. I don't think you can find a single trailer from one of those Rodgers and Hammerstein movie musicals that doesn't proclaim itself to be the most incredible, earth-shattering, respected, and celebrated work of all time. Every one of them proclaims themselves to be this. So in preparation for this, I pulled up a couple of old movies and just watched the trailers for them. Here's the trailer for Humphrey Bogart's movie High Sierra, which came out in 1940. Here's some of the things that flash across the screen as you're watching the movie trailer. It says, the most sensational actress of the past year. The strangest of men in the strangest of stories. It's the greatest story I've ever filmed. Crowell Walsh, director of What Price Glory. Obviously, no film can live up to that. But it's fun, ain't it? How about The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms from 1953? When you watch the trailer, here's the way that they try to sell this movie to you. Are we delving into mysteries we weren't meant to know? Impossible. Unbelievable. Fantastic. But I tell you, it could happen. Not that it does happen in the movie, just that it could happen. Is mankind challenging powers behind the cosmic barriers? Not once does the movie deal with anything cosmic. Will science unleash fearsome forces of lost worlds? Millions spellbound, it says. How could they know that? Comes alive with its stark, screaming terror. I really take a lot of pleasure in these clearly exaggerated and fantastical descriptions, knowing that the movie itself could never possibly live up to such ridiculous, over-the-top hype, and yet, that's part of the fun of it all. In fact, culturally, in Appalachia, you never tell people the actual size of a fish you catch. If a sound was really loud, you don't just say it was loud. You over-embellish everything. So the fish weren't this big. It was, a monster. It was practically a whale you pulled out of there. When you're recounting an experience, you over-embellish everything. You exaggerate everything, and that's part of the fun of sitting around a fire or something and hearing an Appalachian tell a story. Most of it's true. I mean, directionally it's true. But there's exaggerations, embellishments, to really make it colorful and fun. Well, one Saturday, a month or so ago, I was watching some of these old movies and really enjoying the fun of them all. And it occurred to me that there's nothing at all stopping me from loosening up a bit and having a bit more fun with the titles to this Practical Woodsman content. I realized that I was limiting myself. And that's basically the only limits and restrictions that exist for what I'm doing here. The limits and restrictions I hold over my own head. And so I resolved to relax and to get a bit more creative. And that I would begin trying to capture the spirit of some of those old movies and pulp magazines. Pay homage to some of that stuff that I find a lot of fun, that I really loved in my youth, and that I still love. Now, some people will and have accused me of simply engaging in clickbait methods. This is where you say something entirely false just to get somebody in there, and then you don't deliver on any of that stuff. And some people have even gotten angry at me. Two people at this point have accused me of being a con man. Quote, a con man. One guy went on to say, "Did you used to write front page headlines for the National Enquirer? I detest all these clickbait over-the-top headlines and thumbnails. Thumbs down for clickbait." So he got such a colossal hair in his biscuit over this that he actually wants to punish me, punish the content by trying to make sure that other people don't have the chance to see it. Well, excuse me, I can't cheat you out of anything you ain't owed. I don't owe you anything. I don't owe you a video. I don't owe you content. I don't owe you anything at all. If you don't like this completely free thing that I don't have to do at all, move on. Of course you're going to get upset. If you're sitting there at home or on your phone, living with the perspective that I work for you. I don't work for you. Nothing of mine, including my time, anything I create, anything I upload, is anything that you're entitled to. If you get to see it, it's because I'm offering it for free. So is it starting to sink in now? Just how absurd and irrational and frankly out of line with reality your anger and your complaints are. Reminds me of this story that my friend Joshua told me, where a friend of ours named Harry, who's a bricklayer, was working on this project. He was short-handed. He calls Josh up on a weekend and says, man, I could really use your help. Would you mind helping me? So Josh goes to help him free of charge, volunteers his time, gives up his Saturday to go and help this friend of ours, this bricklayer. And the only thing the bricklayer did the whole day was complain about the quality and amount of work that Josh was doing. And Josh looked him square in the eye and said, listen, Harry, I'll tell you what. If you don't like it, go ahead and dock my pay. In other words, I don't have to be here at all. I don't owe you anything. I'm doing you a favor. If you don't like it, what can I say? You're the one who said you needed me. I didn't need you. So, which video did this guy who got such a ginormous hair in his biscuit, which video did he get so angry about? He got angry about exclusive video number 126, which I titled, Shocking, Horrific, The Nasty Weed I Love Eating. So did Elvis. Could save your life. Is that title embellished? Yes. It's an embellished title for fun. For fun. What am I trying to con you out of? I can't con you out of anything that I don't owe you. Is it false or misleading? No, it's embellished. It is not false or misleading, because that exclusive video really is about pokeweed, an edible weed that I love eating and that many people would consider nasty. I could show that video to a dozen girls right now, and they would go, ew, you eat that? I would never eat that. And a lot of people consider it horrific and pesky for growing uncontrollably around their property. So it's an embellished title. It's not a lie. It's my opinion that some people just need to relax, get over themselves, enjoy life a little bit more. I'm not trying to con you. It's like the introduction to the show when I talk about what a genius I am. Obviously, that's done in fun. And I've gotten people writing, commenting on these things, attacking me for that. I tell you what, there's a lot of people out there that don't know how to just relax and enjoy life. Have a little bit of fun. I'm having fun producing this stupid content that costs you nothing, and that often requires a lot of energy and time from me. So I'm the one making this stuff, not you, Mr. Punish the guy for the free content I'm unhappy about. I think that if I want to try and have fun with this stuff I'm doing, I'm more than entitled to do so. I'm paying homage to those old pulp stories and movie trailers that you grew up enjoying watching so much at Saturday matinees, you miserable fart. So just relax. Have fun. Just try to have fun. Don't walk around acting like Every single person on the internet is out to screw you. All right. Let's get on to the main topic of this episode now that I've explained my reasoning behind these embellished titles and thumbnails. They're just meant for fun, guys and girls. They're just meant for fun. Have some fun. How to make a camp. Why would you want to do such a thing? Especially if you're in an area where the quote-unquote rules say that you must not camp anywhere but in predetermined camp areas. Well, first let me tell you why you would not want to make your own camp. Number one, fear of getting in trouble. And number two, lack of convenience. So that's why you would not want to make your own camp. Fear of getting in trouble, lack of convenience. Now that that's out of the way, I can now tell you why you would want to make your own camp. Number one, you're not going to get in trouble. No ranger is going to be stumbling along 10 miles out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, in the dark, checking up on you to make sure you're not camping somewhere the park hasn't already chosen as a camping spot. Let me tell you, if you are at risk of some ranger stumbling across your camp in the middle of the night, you are not in the wilderness. But if you're in the wilderness, there's nobody out there. Nobody's going to come across you. Number two reason that you would want to make your own camp: freedom. Number three, flexibility. Number four, better campsites. Number five, better resources. Number six, better surroundings. Number seven, better solitude and privacy. Number eight, a better chance to encounter actual wildlife. Let me tell you that using only pre-prepared camps really robs you of flexibility and freedom. You see, what happens is it predetermines distances you will have to cover and how you will have to pace not only your day, but your entire time out there. So let's say that you set aside a week off of work, and before you go out there, what I do and what you should do is you should really closely examine the map. Do your very best to figure out mileage and split your days up into manageable distances. Now, if you are resigned to only camping at predetermined campsites, what this means is that it's going to force you into going from different points in a single day or in a single day. So you're going to have to look ahead. Where is the next predetermined campsite? I have to make it there. No options. I have to make it there. Somebody's already determined that that's where I have to camp, and that's where I'm going to try to get to. That's where I have to get. So do you see how it robs you of freedom and flexibility? Because what that also means is that you can't, on a whim. You know, one of the beauties of being out in the backcountry is spontaneity. Like, you don't know what you're going to see out there. I mean, I remember this last trip I took. Man, I come across these spectacular, and that's not embellishment, spectacular waterfalls. Gorgeous waterfalls. I didn't know those were there. Well, because we come across these spectacular waterfalls, and because of flexibility and a willingness to make our own camp, we said, let's just spend the night here. So that's what you get to do. Based on what you find out there, which you don't know what's out there until you get out there. Well, then you can be spontaneous like that if you're willing to create your own camp and you're not so beholden to getting to predetermined or pre-prepared camps. So on a whim, you can stop and spend more time in a place if you happen to come across something really interesting. Let's say that you come across a cave or something like that, but you've only got 3 hours left in the day and you've still got 10 miles to go. Well, clearly you're not going to be able to stop and really enjoy that exploring that cave or that land formation or that waterfall or whatever it is if you're in such a hurry. If where you have to stay is predetermining how much time you've got and how much distance you have to cover. So creating your own camp really offers you freedom. There's no limits. I remember going out years ago with a good friend of mine who often goes on some of these trips with me, and him looking at the clock, looking at things getting dark, and him saying, my goodness, we're going to be hiking for hours in the dark. And I would say to him, Jeff, relax. We can stay anywhere we want. We can stop anytime we want. And you know, that's a mantra that I've held firm to in all of my years doing this. I go out there, I'm not under any pressure. I don't have to get anywhere. I can stay anywhere I want. In fact, I usually arrange things so that I don't have concrete days when I have to come out. So what that means is that if I want to take an extra day, I can. And this alarm is not going to go around that I'm dead or lost, or, you know, the emergency services with their packs of dogs aren't going to come out into the mountains searching for me, helicopters hovering everywhere, if I'm a day or two late. So I like to build freedom and flexibility into these activities. Is there anything else I want to say about freedom and flexibility? Well, yes. Think about how much freedom and flexibility that offers when it's your attitude that I don't have to keep hiking. I can stop anytime I want to. That means if you're hiking along and you're tired or you're hungry or whatever, or if it's getting dark, but you're not where you think you're supposed to be yet, you can say, you know what, it doesn't matter. And that can create some really spectacular memories and experiences out in the woods. I'll tell you, the best experiences are not at predetermined campsites. They're at the ones where you're sleeping in a place where nobody that you know of has ever slept before. The animals aren't used to people being there. The resources aren't depleted. It's pristine. Better campsites. Let me tell you something about not being allowed, quote unquote, to camp in places where predetermined campsites don't already exist. So this is a thing, right? When you're planning, like, let's say that you're a backpacker and you're going out, and the rules, quote unquote, say that you're not supposed to stay at you're not supposed to sleep or have a fire. Let's say those two things, because a lot of people will say, okay, so I can camp, but I dare not have a fire. For me, a camp, there is no such thing as a camp without a fire. You got to have a fire. So that you know what I'm talking about. You go into these wilderness areas, and that's the quote unquote rule. You have to stay where these predetermined camps are. Like I said, if you're in an area where you're at risk of camping where there's not a pre-established campsite and you're worried about getting caught, you're not in wilderness. Because if you're in wilderness, nobody's going to come stumbling across you. Not even a ranger. And usually, when do you start setting up camp? Right at the evening, or at the tail end of evening, right before the sun's going down. So what ranger has the time to just go doing like a 20-mile hike right at the end of nightfall? Anyway, we're going to talk about some ways that concern is irrelevant anyway. But my friend Jeff and my brother, 15 years ago, we went out to this area that was like that had that rule in place where you have to stay at predetermined campsites. Even then, I was already working with the mentality, that's hogwash. I'm not paying any attention to that. I can stop anywhere I want and set up camp. And so we had hiked far enough, and it got dark on us, and it had been raining all day long. Well, there was a break in the rain, and we had been hiking for, 5-6 miles, something like that. And we come up over along the side of this cliff. Spectacular vista in the night. And it was a full moon night. Clouds broke, moon come out, and we could see out over this tremendous holler. This great valley. And it was spectacular. And I said, you know what? We are all topped up with the water. We've all got plenty of water to get us through the night and get us started tomorrow. I looked at the map. I saw where there was a water source, a very likely water source, not too far the next day. I said, let's set up camp right here. Oh, well, we're not supposed to do that. I said, we're doing it anyway. And so we created our own camp there. Wonderful night. My late dog Bradbury, that was one of the very early trips that he took with us, and I've got pictures and stuff of him as a puppy while we're camped out on that ledge in the moonlight, and just spectacular. One thing I remember is that you could look out down over the holler there, and my brother was familiar with that area down in that holler, and he said, look, you see that tunnel? We looked down, sure enough, there's a tunnel down there. That is supposedly it's an abandoned tunnel, an old railroad tunnel that is supposedly haunted. So anyway, that's just a little bit of trivia there. We were looking down over that holler down it. We could see that tunnel even in the moonlight. We spent the night there and, went, and that whole adventure, of course, is memorable. But the most memorable thing is us staying there where there were no signs that anybody had ever stayed there. We're in an area where you're only supposed to stay where there are predetermined campsites, and there were no predetermined campsites anywhere in that area. Well, guess what? I went back to that area just a couple years ago. 13 years had passed. And do you know, when I come up around that ridge, they had made that into a permanent campsite. And now it's actually on the map as a predetermined campsite that is people are allowed to stay at, quote unquote, allowed to stay at. So it was me and my friend and my brother who established that campsite. And it come about from me saying, you know what, this is ridiculous. We can stay anywhere we want. This is a great spot to stay. We're going to stay here. And we did. And people come up behind us also thought the same thing, apparently. Saw that we had stayed there, and they've actually put a fire ring there and everything, and they've made it all more convenient for other backpackers. So that's a true story. Better campsites. I just wonder how many years people hiked up through there and thought, distance-wise, location-wise, picturesque-wise, this would be an excellent camp, but we can't do it. We can't do it because nobody said we could, and just kept hiking on until me and my little group come along and said, you know what, forget all that. We're going to stay here. So you do end up with better campsites, better resources. Let me tell you this, especially if you're one of these folks who, pretty much your experience in these sorts of things is things like the Appalachian Trail, which, again, I don't consider true wilderness because it's so popular. It's just overrun with people all year round. But let's say that you're on the Appalachian Trail. Let's say you have experience hiking the Appalachian Trail. You know the difficulties with a scarcity of resources. You come into a camp, it is just, it's like exactly what it is. Thousands of people have come through. There's not a twig you can find to get a fire started. Because the area where these predetermined campsites are just stripped bare of resources. So, especially in areas like that, on trails that are so popular and overrun with people, if you're willing to go off trail and create your own campsite, you're looking at tons of resources. Here's what happens in the woods. Over a natural season in the woods, tree limbs and trees fall. They're falling all the time. These branches are falling all the time. Those are the branches you're picking up to make your fire. Trees that fall down are the trees that you're taking out your silky saw to cut for firewood. These are necessary resources for a comfortable camp. Well, when you're only staying at places that are predetermined, that hundreds or even thousands of other people are walking through there every day, every single day, and stripping all the resources out of there, then there's no resources. There's no wood and stuff for fires and stuff like that. But if you're willing to forego those predetermined campsites, go off trail into these areas where people don't go, all of the trees that have fallen, all of the branches that have fallen, all these things that are there, all these resources that are there are left undisturbed. So the more inconvenience you're willing to put yourself through, the more resources you will have right there at hand. Think about when you've stayed at these predetermined campsites, how far you've had to walk sometimes. Just to find some wood to put on your fire. When people come into a predetermined campsite, a prearranged campsite, the first to come are the ones that are going to have to wander, W-A-N-D-E-R, wander, the least distance in order to find resources. And then every subsequent person or party that comes up behind them, the further they're going to have to wander out to find the resources. That's just how it works. And so you come into some of these places, you end up having to walk a daggum mile just to find firewood. That's not fun to me. Well, it's not fun for me to share. It's not fun for me to go out into the woods when it's not wilderness. And what makes an area not wilderness is people. So if there's a lot of people out there, that's not wilderness. If everything is prearranged for you, that's not wilderness. But if that's all you got, or if you're starting out, start committing yourself to not staying at these predetermined campsites. The resources will abound. And the better the more thick, I guess, what am I trying to say? I reckon the more abundant the resources in an area, well, then you don't have to wander off anywhere at all. It's lying right there. The tree that you can saw on all night long with your silky saw is literally right there. All you have to do is get up from your seat, take 10 steps, and there's all your firewood for an entire night. You never be without. The twigs and stuff, you need to get the fire started. You just pick them up off the ground. They're right there. You don't have to go on this big long search or wander too far away from the camp. They're right there. So better resources, better surroundings. Let's talk about better surroundings. Well, it's kind of like that story I told about us walking up along that ridge in the moonlight and saying, man, we're stopping right here. We were surrounded by trees and wildlife, moonlight, no people. No concern anybody's going to come up, walking up on us and disturb our peace or disturb our sense of isolation. So better surroundings. You can't get that with pre-arranged or pre-built or predetermined campsites that everybody is making a beeline for that night. There's a trail here that's close by. For convenience sake, I've been out there several times. It's like a 40-mile trail. I won't do it anymore. There's a college nearby, and everybody from that college, all the young people from that college, they head there in droves, and it just completely ruins the experience for me. Like I said, for convenience, and sometimes I've resorted to it, but I've decided not to do that anymore. So the very first predetermined campsite is like, I'm going to say 5 miles in. So let's say on a Friday night, you head out there. What is everybody else doing? They're also going out on a Friday night. Why? Because they've got school off, they've got work off. It's convenient for all the folks around this area here. So anybody who's slightly interested in this sort of thing, they're heading out there on a Friday night too. If you want to increase your odds of them that area not being overrun with people, what do you got to do? You got to be willing to go out on a Tuesday, like on a Tuesday night. But even then, if a place is so convenient for you, it's also super convenient for lots of other people. And so you're never going to get out there where you're not going to run into people and where you're really going to feel a sense of isolation or of being out in wilderness. The next thing is, what are they all making a beeline for? because it's getting dark, right? So if you can't get started until Friday night, it means that you're probably going to get to the trailhead like around 6, 7, something like that, maybe 8. You're tired. It's been a long day. You want to get in and get camp set up. So what is on everybody's minds? Beeline for that first camp, right? That first camp opportunity is what everybody is making a beeline for. You see the problem? And on this particular trail, they've even got like 5 or 6 predetermined campsites up there. They will all be full. They'll all be full. Unless you manage to take off at noon or something and get a head start on those folks. So if you're going to do something like that, what do you got to be willing to do? Skip the predetermined campsites. You've got to go out, if that's all you got, it's the closest thing, it's the most convenient thing, you're sick of not getting out into the woods, and so that's the best you got. How do you make the best of that situation? You make it a point, your intention, before you even go out there, that you will not be staying at a predetermined campsite. You're going to make your own. So you're going to be willing to pass up all those campsites, go 6, 7 miles in rather than stopping at the first 5 miles where all those people are camping, and make your own campsite. That's the way you got to do it. Well, a side benefit of that is that you're going to have better surroundings than they are. You're going to actually be experiencing the woods rather than this mall-like environment, or this societal-like environment that has just been transplanted into the woods. So be willing to pass those things up. You're going to enjoy better surroundings. I remember my late dog Bradbury, got started real late one night. We hiked for about 3 hours. I started getting tired. Again, I'm working with this idea we can sleep anywhere. And we went off trail and started building our own campsite. And I don't know, I never did figure out what it was, but where we set up camp there, I got a fire started and we were in something's territory. It wasn't a small animal. It was a larger animal, but I never did figure out what it was. But I could just hear it moving all around the light of my fire. I couldn't see it. I could just hear it, and from the sound of it, I could hear that it was a larger animal. And my dog, he was on guard. I felt safe, and as long as I had it, I tell you, as long as I had Brady with me, I knew I had nothing to fear. If it was something to worry about, he would take care of it. If it was not something to worry about, he would let me know by not caring. And then I would sleep like a baby. And that's what I did that night. But beautiful campsite in the middle of the woods, true woods. We'd come across a stream there, so I had water all night. Wonderful experience. On another occasion, I learned, for example, I had always thought, what if I built, like if I come down into a holler, or like let's say that there's a hollow place in the ground on a really cold night, I wonder what would happen if I could build the fire down in that hollow. Not a holler, not a valley, but like an indent in the ground, almost like a hole in the ground. If I could build the fire down there, and then I could sit around the rim of this hollow or depression in the ground, well, you know what heat does, it rises. So that seemed like a good idea to me. Maybe I can do that. And I was always thinking, if I get an opportunity to do that, I'm going to try that out. Well, one night that happened. Me and a girlfriend, and my dog Brady again, got a late start, and we decided to go off trail and create our own campsite. And we come across a depression in the ground like that. It was a cold night. I said, here, I want to try this. So I got a fire going down there, imagining that we could just sit around the lip of this depression, and the heat would come up and warm us. It would be a really effective type of heat thing. And plus, the depression would keep the fire safe from wind and things like that. Let me tell you, it didn't work out as well as I thought it was going to work out. It created a lot of problems. One of the major problems was that every time I wanted to feed the fire or I just wanted to sit and relax, my body wanted to slide down into the fire. So it wasn't as perfect an arrangement as I thought it was, and I've not ever done it since. I probably won't ever do it again. So if you've ever been wondering about something like that, I'm here to tell you I've tried that. It didn't work out. It created more problems than it created anything else. When it was, when you build a fire down into a hole or a depression like that, It doesn't get as much oxygen. It's harder to feed the fire and work with the fire. If you want to cook on the fire, that's difficult because you got to try to get down close to the fire without actually falling into it and things like that. So I wouldn't recommend it. But anyway, that whole experience is a result of me being willing not to create a camp around an area that's predetermined. Better solitude and privacy. You can go to the bathroom anywhere. Anywhere. Don't have to worry about people coming across you. You don't have to worry about anything. Don't have to worry about hiking 10 miles away from the camp just so people don't see you. No, you can hike 20 feet and people won't see you. You can skinny dip. I told a story last week about setting up at this camp that I thought was out in the middle of nowhere. And here I am the next day skinny dipping. Barely. I just got in and got out. It was so cold, that water. Painful cold. I'm standing up on this rock trying to put my britches back on, and this whole line of bike riders come riding by right there. Because I had gotten started late at night, and because I didn't check the map out thoroughly, I thought I was like out in the middle of Timbuktu. What I saw later is that this bike trail run right through there, and so they were as surprised as I was. But if you're in actual wilderness, and you actually are willing to set up and create your own camp, then you don't have the privacy concerns that people will have who don't do that, who are committed to only staying at predetermined campsites. You have a lot more privacy. You can romance your gal at night without worrying about anybody coming up on you wanting to stay there too, right? Because if you've created the campsite yourself, they don't know it's there. Nobody's making a beeline for that place where you're at. But if you're at a predetermined campsite, anybody who's out there is aiming to stay there that night, or at least aiming to walk through there that night. That's not true when you're willing to create your own campsite. We're going to talk about how to do it, all right? But that's just a natural effect of being willing to create your own campsite. There's a better chance to encounter wildlife. Let me tell you some of the wildlife I've come across. And I'll tell you why there's a better chance. Because they're not used to people being there. They're used to having it completely to themselves and not having any presence of people there at all, which is not true for these predetermined campsites. So when you get into these areas, it's like that story I just told you about me and Brady setting up camp, and we must have set camp right there where something likes to spend the night, because that thing was moving around our fire half the night, upset that we were apparently in his or her spot. So I would love to know what that was. It wasn't a bear. I'm not sure what it was, but some of the animal encounters I've had from doing this is bears, elk, foxes. One time I saw a mom fox come out. She didn't know I was there, playing with her little fox cubs, or whatever they're called, fox pups. It was so cute, man. Beautiful moment, a beautiful memory. Deer, porcupines, owls, wildcats. These are things, some of these are really skittish. You'll never see them otherwise. Very unlikely. Very unlikely, especially in areas where people dominate, where the animals get used to people being in that area, making people smells and sounds and stuff. You get away from those areas and you start to create your own campsites, you'll begin to see a lot more wildlife, and it's a thrilling, memorable, beautiful experience. So let's talk about how to do it. Well, I've pretty much alluded to it this entire show, but you have to be willing to leave the trail. Whichever direction the trail's heading, just cut off the trail to either side and go in deep. Go deep off the trail. You just want to pay attention to direction. So, I reckon you could use a compass for it, but I typically just pay attention to the sun. Which direction is the sun setting? All right, there's my direction. If the sun is setting directly ahead of you and you're going down a trail, well, then you know you're heading west. So if you cut off to the trail to your left, what direction are you going? And if you cut off to the right, what direction are you going? Well, right is going to be north, left is going to be south. So if you head in south, so if you head off the trail by cutting left and the sun is setting in ahead of you, and you cut off the trail to the left and you go in deep enough so that people coming down the trail, potentially, this is if you're in areas that are, more heavily visited, so the trail is heading in one direction. The sun is setting in the direction you're walking. That's got to be west. So if you cut off the trail to the left, that's got to be south. So let's say that you just head in south far enough that you can get your privacy and everything like that, and you can set up in a nice area. Well, then in the morning, you make a mental note of that. And then in the morning when you get up, you know that all you got to do is head the opposite direction. You just head north. And it'll be impossible to miss the trail as long as you head north. That's the way that works. Just pay attention to direction. If you want to use a compass, you can do that. You can follow. The way you can do it is you can get your compass out. Follow a straight heading on your compass, just deep enough. I'm talking like 100 yards, maybe 200 yards down into the forest or up into the forest, whichever direction, whatever. But you're following the compass, so you know you're maintaining a direction. Doesn't matter how deep you go in. The next day, you get up and you just turn around. You follow the compass in the direct opposite direction. And you will hit the trail, because the trail cuts right through there. There's no missing it. All you have to do is pay attention to direction, and then you won't be able to miss the trail. You want to go in far enough that your campfire won't be seen from the trail. So let's say in the unlikely chance somebody comes walking through there, they're not going to, but let's say that they do come walking through there at 2 o'clock in the morning, that they're not going to see it. And if you're in a popular area where it's just overrun with people, well, of course, if you're going to go off the trail, you want to go deeper in. So maybe 300, 400, 500 yards off the trail. Far enough so that your campfire in the middle of the night is not going to be easily seen by other people. Or, let's say that you're in a group. I never go in with groups larger than 4. I think 4 is the maximum, is the largest group I've ever gone into the backcountry with. Usually it's just me and my dog, or it's me and one other person and my dog. But anyway, you know how you get around camp, and especially if there's a little bit of booze involved, the stories get louder and the laughter gets louder and stuff like that. You don't want that stuff to carry and be heard by somebody who's coming down the trail. My preference is water. I want water all night long. You don't appreciate how much water you just go through on a I'm not even talking about using it liberally. I'm talking about just the bare necessities of water usage during a day. In day-to-day life, you'd be amazed at how much water you go through, especially if you throw in showers and all that. But let's just say drinking, cooking, and washing a few things. You would be amazed at how much water consumption that takes. So it's almost, with the exception of just a few rare instances, like that night we spent up on that mountain ridge, on that full moon night, up the mountain from that supposedly haunted tunnel. With the exception of that, and maybe 1 or 2 other occasions, I always want water. That's my number one thing. I want water, running, clean water all night long. There's been a couple of times where I've only had mud puddles, like puddles, that I've had to filter and boil. That works, as long as you've got the treatment methods with you. But I typically like to go for running, streams, and creeks. So I'm always aiming for that, which I'm glad I brought that up. Let's go back to you choosing to go off the trail. Let's say that the trail is heading one direction. On one side of the trail, it goes up the mountain. And let's say on the other side of the trail, it slopes down. Which one are you more likely to find water at? The one that slopes down. A greater certainty of finding water is always down. So I would tend to leave the trail and go down especially down into a holler, down into a little ravine. That's where I expect to find water, down between these two mountains or down between these two slopes. So that's where I'm going to go. I'm looking for water. I want running water all night long. I can almost always find it. Picturesque. You want to look for an area that's picturesque, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to maximize the experience, the enjoyment of the experience, the memories that you're going to carry off with you. Maybe you've got a camera out there. You want to capture some fantastic pictures. You want to look for something picturesque. You want it to be memorable. That means flat ground is not required. And in fact, the more picturesque an area you're going to find the more picturesque an area, the more unlikely you're going to find large, perfectly flat, cleared out areas right there. You know the nature of streams and creeks. They snake along. They wind and create these picturesque little islands and stuff, which are just beautiful. They create the best scenery. They create the best sounds at night. And so get away from this idea that you have to have a perfectly flat area to camp in. The more flat an area, the less likely that's going to be, the less picturesque that is likely to be. So get accustomed, adapt to being able to sleep in areas that are not perfectly flat. You know, the side of a hill or an incline or a mountain can be used to sleep like you're lying in a recliner. So it's just like that. You just lie up against the side of the mountain with your head up and your feet down toward your fire or water source, like the creek or the stream. So get some experience setting camp in unusual areas that don't look immediately doable. There's been so many areas where I've said, I don't immediately see how we're going to do this. All I know is that here's where I want to stay tonight. And those areas have been the most thrilling and fulfilling memories and experiences. You know, tarps make that very possible, but another thing you've got to be willing to do is sleep outside of a shelter, sleep without a shelter. But if you absolutely have to have a shelter because of weather, learn how to carry a tarp. And you can pitch tarps anywhere. That's the beauty of them. You can pitch them right off the side of a mountain or off the side of a decline or an incline and those sorts of things. My thinking is that if a spot looks appealing enough, there is a way for me to make it work. And that can get complicated the more people you have with you. But like I said earlier, I think the maximum, and only one time that many people, was 4 in our group. Much more frequently 3 people, and much more frequently than that, me and another person and my dog, and just as frequently as that, just me and my dog. So you can see how the more people you've got more people wanting their own spot where they can get comfortable and everything. So that's what complicates it. But the fewer people you have in your group, the easier it is to see a spot and say, man, I don't know how I'm going to make that work, but I'm going to make that work because I want to stay there tonight. I remember an excursion I made with, speaking of 4 people, we were 4 in our group climbing up the side of this mountain, and there was this mountain, crystal clear mountain stream coming down the side of this mountain with a rock outcrop. It was so picturesque. Man, I wanted to stay there so bad. But then, you know, that's another thing. The more people you've got with you, the more you have to be willing to forego your preferences and yield to the democratic process, you know. So we didn't get to stay there that night because they were worried about finding a perfectly flat spot and all this stuff. The fact that it lives on in my memory as, golly, I wish I could have stayed there that night, just goes to show you how much I enjoy staying in these really picturesque places where there's not a predetermined camp there, and just figuring out a way to make it work. The less standard the camping spot, the better the experience at night's going to be, the better the memories, the better everything. So look for water. I think I've already said that. Look for untouched areas, lots of down branches and trees. So when you leave the trail and you go and you're looking for this picturesque spot with water to create your camp, you also want to look around at resources. If it's a bare area in the trees, you're not going to find resources there. You want to find an area where there's a bunch of down trees, lots of branches have fallen and stuff like that, because then you're just going to, with minimal effort, with minimal searching, with minimal walking, you're going to have tons of resources there to stay comfortable and have a wonderful camp for the entire night. Use the inside part of your boot to scrape away the ground. You're scraping away branches, twigs, leaves, so forth, to create a spot large enough for underneath your shelter, or if you're not pitching a shelter that night, you want to clear out an area that's with your boot, just sliding your boot, the inside of your boot, in toward you across the ground to scrape away rocks, large twigs, and things like that, so you can put down your sleeping gear, not have those things underneath of you in the middle of the night. Use this same technique to clear away the ground where you're going to put your fire. Use your boot, scrape away that ground, clear that area out. You want to make sure that you clear a large enough area, not just for the fire. Remember, you're trying to clear away a large enough area for any coals or hot sparks that come up out of the fire. So clear an area large enough that even when the hot coals and the sparks come up out of the fire, they're not going to drift along and land down on this basically tinder bundle that you've scraped up with your boot. So make sure to clear plenty of space. In the morning, my recommendation is that you do douse your fire with water. I've seen fires that I thought were entirely put out. I've left that area and come back a couple hours later to find a fire burning there. So you don't know how hot those coals are down underneath the ash and stuff. They'll stay hot for a long time, even if you try to clear that away. Now, in the past, I've said, if you're going to put your fire out, or before you leave camp, dump dirt on top of the fire, or sand. That's a better way, because of why? What was my reasoning? My reasoning was that you're in an area where there's lots of other people, and somebody behind you is going to come along. They're going to want to camp at this predetermined campsite where you're at. And when they go to make their fire, what they're going to find is this slushy, nasty mess in the middle of this fire ring, because somebody poured water. Everybody who comes through there pours water over that to kill their fire. And I said a better way to do that, if you're in these types of areas where lots of people are coming through, is to use sand or dirt, because that's being considerate for, it does the same thing, and that's being considerate for the people who are probably coming 2 hours behind you. But in this circumstance, what are we talking about? We're not talking about a campsite where anybody else is ever going to come across, most likely. Nobody's going to come in there and want to make a fire there. So it doesn't matter if there's a sloppy, wet mess there. So when you're creating your own campsites out of scratch and you're leaving the next day, my recommendation is that you do douse your fire completely with water. Make sure that fire is completely put out. Well, folks, that's the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching or listening to the Practical Woodsman podcast. If you're only a subscriber to the audio, why don't you join me on YouTube and Rumble, so that you can see the videos, not only these podcasts that I do in video format, but a lot of other things I do, like exclusive videos, which are videos revolving around things I just want to show off. There's adventures. Those are my times in the woods. And so I would love for you to see those things. I'd hate for you to miss out. And that's all I got. I hope you folks have enjoyed this. Enjoy your weekend.